everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life.
Welcome back to the channel. I've got Chris Leblanc on this week, and he is a law enforcement trainer with a very strong background in classical and traditional martial arts. So I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and we've interacted a little bit thanks to the internet, and it's always been interesting, and I think we're going to have a good time talking today. So real quick before we get started, Chris, why don't you tell everybody a bit about your background?
Absolutely. And by the way, thanks for having me on. It's been an honor that you even asked. So I very much appreciate that. I did 28 years in law enforcement in Southwest Washington State. I worked for Vancouver, Washington, which is just over the river from Portland, Oregon. We're kind of like Portland's north precinct. During that time, I spent between 17 and 18 years. I was on the team, left the team, came back on the team, and both times spent 8 to 9 years. So I'm kind of hazy on the specific details of how long I spent, but that was all while I was working patrol. I did 25 years on patrol and did roughly 17 and a half, 18 on SWAT. And then my last 3 years, I was full-time trainer. I retired in May of this year, so that was put the cap on that career.
Congratulations, by the way. That means you won.
Yeah, dude, I tell you what, people ask me, hey, how's it feel and this and that? And I'm like, I'm surprised I don't think about it more. And it's not like I miss it. I miss some of the people, but it's a stress just went away. And yeah.
Like the way I describe it is that I'm very nostalgic for it, but I'm also happy that that part of my life has been completed. I guess is like the best way to put it, right? Like I wouldn't trade the experiences for anything, either with that or the military. But I'm very happy to be the retired guy that survived all that and is building a life after that.
Oh, 100%. And psychologically intact. I mean, I'm sure you've seen, I've seen some of my peers and they just have a hard time letting go. And some of it is, I think, not having something outside of the job. And I mean, if you do pursue a discipline, martial arts, shooting, things like that, you have something that you can still kind of stay connected to that world, to that kind of warrior part of your identity. But if you don't have that, I think a lot of people don't know what to do once they retire.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, and it doesn't have to be something martial necessarily, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Like I've known guys that retired and they were writers, or they were painters, or they were, their hobby was working on classic cars, but having something you can kind of shift your energy over to, and not having, I think it's dangerous to have a self-identity that's tied into one aspect of what you have done.
Yeah.
Rather than who you are. Like who you are hasn't changed. What you're doing is changing.
Yeah.
But you're still you. And I think people lose sight of that because their identity is the job or their military status or any of those things, when that's really not. All right, I'm going to wax philosophical for a second, right? Since we're both martial artists. It's like the whole thing about, the part of your brain that's really you is the observer, right? And all the noise is just what's getting filtered through from the outside world. And the observer isn't a cop. He's not a black belt. He's not a soldier. He's just that still point that is your personality and your character, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, 100%. Yeah. And I do think, it's tough. You see people that want to hang on. It's like, well, I can't let go because they need me. This nebulous, they need me, right? They still don't have it, and this and that. And a great friend of mine, one of my former team leaders on SWAT, had a great way of putting it, and it was, you can't. It's hard to be the big kid when your older brother is always around. At some point, we have to step aside and let them take over. And I don't think we realize, hey, look, they're going to learn through mistakes. You're not going to be able to protect them from that. In fact, they need to learn that way. It just gives you a different sense of it when it's time to move on.
I almost fell into that trap. My last spot on the department was I was the training coordinator for our SWAT team.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still operational. I still went on all the call outs, right? But my job was running the training for the whole team. And my plan was always to go at 50 with 20, because I joined the department late because of my military time, right?
Okay.
And I hit 50 and I was like, I'm making real strides. I'm getting things accomplished. I can't go yet. And then at 51, I woke up and I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? There's other people that are competent that can do this without me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. I kind of ran into that myself. I was planning on leaving the department. I got into our department right when into our training division right when there was a lot of change going on in our department. And so I actually had a lot of ability to change stuff and change a lot of our training. And then as that kind of got going, I started thinking about, okay, we opened up a regional academy in our area, and we were going to be involved in that. I was going to retire and thinking about retiring and then going into a kind of academy training position.
Yeah.
But once the academy started being set up, you start getting all the old interpersonal dynamics, all the political stuff, this and that. And I woke up one day and said, why would I want to do that? Why would our department kind of turned itself around, got rid of some pretty toxic people in our command, and changed the way we were approaching some things, which was all really positive. And my option was to go right back into an environment like that, and one in which I didn't have any influence, where people didn't know me or anything like that. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. And I think it was, certainly for my mental health and my wife's mental health, I think that was a better decision for sure.
Well, and they talk about, there's this thing called operator syndrome they talk about a lot, and it's basically how the allostatic load of always being that ready state, that pressure, mm-hmm. over time starts to have really deleterious effects to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gets more dangerous the later you leave. The older you get, I think it compounds more and more,
Yeah. Well, and being on a pager, man, so I wake up to this day. I wake up between 2 and 3 every day. Why? Because that was when that would be the time I'd need to wake up to start getting ready for pre-planned missions and stuff, to go down and start getting my gear ready and doing all that. And it's burned into you, and that's not healthy. It's terrible for your sleep. And as you get older, I think you're exactly right. It just has much more of an impact on us.
All right. So let's shift gears a little bit, because I know we're not even done with your intro yet. Let's talk about your martial arts background a bit.
Oh, sure. So I've done martial arts since my late teens. Started in Taekwondo, I think like everybody else. I did ITF Taekwondo back before they were doing kind of the Olympic style now.
Yeah.
So it was it was more like karate or full contact karate without being able to punch to the face. And we wore pads instead of the Kyokushinkai style stuff. But you could kick to the head, knockouts, things like that happened. And so that's where I really got a real taste for, I think, doing work against opposing will. You have to train where you're dealing with people you're actually fighting with. However, I have a strong traditional streak, and I kind of shifted from that into traditional Chinese martial arts, which I did for a while, until I started working security jobs. I started working security jobs because I was interested in getting involved in law enforcement, and started getting involved in some confrontations, and really realized that a lot of my training really wasn't up to the task. And so I drifted over to jiu-jitsu. Back then, it was really hard to find any BJJ schools. There were some in Seattle that had black belt level people, but back then a purple belt was rare.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of an ad hoc group, bunch of judoka, some wrestlers, and then some people that had started doing some jiu-jitsu seminars. And that really started me into more of a grappling mode. And been doing that ever since. Ended up getting a black belt in judo from Obukan in Portland, Oregon, and then a black belt in BJJ from Tim Cartmel. Now I really don't do a lot of that because I'm really trying to apply more of those lessons in a more of a purely combatives way. In addition to that, I ended up training with Ellis, as we were talking about, Ellis Amder, who is a licensed instructor of a couple of different Koryu Bujutsu, or classical Japanese martial arts. I studied one called Arakidu, and in a different version he really heads two lines of Arakidu. One is his kind of take on the school, and another is one where you can train in a more modular fashion, and so you can train different aspects of the school as you that fit what your needs are. And I did something called Torite, which is sort of like a classical version of arrest and control, and Kogusoku, which is a edged weapon survival, where you're basically trying to defeat someone who has ambushed you with an edged weapon, with a knife usually. Ended up getting the instructor certification in that. And then now, basically, I only do private training. I've got a couple of different groups that do different things within that. And that's pretty much my martial background.
So something I want to point out for the people watching, because I know not everybody understands how like the older Ryuha work, the older Koryu arts, and they might not even know that word. So Koryu is it's an old school. It's like the classic schools from the Middle Ages. Having a menkyo, a license in those, is a lot more than just having a black belt. Like it's not like having a first degree black belt.
Yeah. Well, especially, black belts are in Japanese martial arts are pretty easy to come by. They're not, it's not the same as in BJJ. BJJ, really a purple belt is more like what you get as a black belt in Japanese martial arts, because they feel black belt means you've got the basics and you can train, you can do the full training, but do it safely.
It's like a starting point.
Exactly. Black belt, judo kind of traditionally, you got to be fourth dan before you can teach and open your own school. And that's really, I think, more like what a black belt in BJJ is. It represents a much longer path for most people. It represents a much longer path. The menkyo, or some kind of a certification, and Ellis kind of does both in the two different lines that he does. The difference there, I actually think it's a better way to teach, because it certifies knowledge, not necessarily skill. We've gotten this weird idea that this little old man who's sitting on the edge of the mat somehow needs to be able to beat the youngest competitive champion, and that's not real. That doesn't.
It's a myth. It's a myth, and it doesn't have to do. And it's frustrating to me too. And it's not just martial arts, but shooting has gotten that way also, right? Like there are people who are really good shooters who no longer can perform like they could have in their 20s or 30s, but have the knowledge to pass on the skills. Right. And that, for teaching, I think that is more important. Not that you shouldn't be able to do it. You should absolutely be able to do it. You probably should have had to be able to do it at a high level at one point. But we all age. We all get injuries. We all fade in our skill. But knowledge never has to fade. You can keep learning more and more, even if you can't perform like a 25-year-old who had the same knowledge could.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, not only that, wisdom, right? You start gaining wisdom. And so now and some of that is wisdom in how to teach and how to instruct people. And I just think that a lot of the modern martial arts suffer from that, because the black belt sort of is a symbolic of, oh, well, you're a fourth degree black belt, you should be able to beat everybody. And it's like, no, you should be able to teach everybody. Those are two different things.
Yeah, and it's like, so I started in Shotokan, right? Which, pretty hard style of karate, right?
Yep.
And I'm glad I started there. there were things that I wanted to find that led me to go other places, but it's an underrated art.
Mhm.
Although, you see like Machida and UFC, and it can be
Right.
done at a really effective level if
Mhm.
you have
Oh, yeah.
that bent,
That's
that
what I was
mindset,
thinking
right?
of. That's where Kyokushin comes from too. So
Yeah, no, it is. It's Masoyama split off. And it was like, because I got my Shodan in a couple years, but you weren't really considered like, you weren't even taken seriously as a competitor if you weren't at least Nidan, right?
Mhm.
And you had to be kind of a Sandan to even teach. And that was just the way they looked at it, you
Right.
know? And like I'm doing BJJ now, and like you said, it's very different. And I don't have any rank in BJJ. It's something I've started late in life. If my body holds up, I'd like to eventually get some. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes, right? But I think that their way of looking at it's kind of almost the same model mentally, but with different belt ranks.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think like a purple belt is like a Shodan in karate
Right.
or judo.
Yeah. I go back and forth. Sometimes I think, the whole black belt thing, black belt, white belt, the whole thing that Kano came up with, it was almost one of the worst things to happen in the martial arts. However, I understand it, especially if you're teaching large groups, now you're teaching on a mass level. But I think that the Japanese approach is very different and has sort of been converted, but in a different way. In BJJ, when you first get your black belt, that's not a quote unquote first degree. You have to wait 3 years before you get your first stripe. Now you're a first degree, which is different from judo, karate, shodan, and then after that nidan, sandan, etc.
Yeah, and I think I can see the merits of both ways. I really can, and I do think that, Shodan, and it might not be Shodan because they're not all Japanese arts, but like in America, it has been cheapened in a lot of schools and given away too easily, and that's a negative too, right? You need to have like a Shodan should have a solid grasp of technique and fundamentals and principles and understand them and be able to train hard safely.
Right.
And you don't always see that with some of the schools here in the States. But I also think that, how can I articulate this? There's value in a lot of things that get looked down on by people that do the modern versions. And I kind of consider, even though I really enjoy BJJ, I kind of consider it a more modern take. So modern take on judo really is what it is.
Right. Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with Ellis just recently about this, because and it's partly jokingly, and done intentionally to trigger people, but BJJ is basically just judo.
Yeah, it's really pre-World War II judo.
That's really what it is. Now, I think Ellis brings up a good point, and he says that culture has a real impact on that. And so how the Brazilians approached jiu-jitsu or judo culturally changed how the art manifests for them. I think there's two ways of thinking that, because we don't say American jiu-jitsu, although actually people are saying that now, which is more kind of like a return to catch almost. But the inagi, I think, judo or BJJ is fundamentally judo, but they took the groundwork to a level that does. I mean, that's, I think, problem is a lot of judoka think, well, we have that in judo. No, you don't, because you don't practice that. You're not training that all the time the way they are. So it's different.
Having it and being highly skilled at it are two different things.
Yeah, exactly. Which is and we'll go the other direction. BJJ and Nagewaza are throwing, totally different. And I've seen people that are brown belts in BJJ and can't even do proper break falls, and don't really know a lot of throws. And you're like, well, how can you do this grappling art, not be able to take a guy from standing to the ground? And so it just, a lot of that stuff just becomes a lot of back and forth. Well, we, the royal, we do this and you do that. And it just, it really distracts from the training, which is what we all should be doing, and to get better at all those things.
And here's what I do like about both judo and BJJ. And I've got a little bit of experience with Kodokan Judo, not a huge amount. There was a police club in Chicago,
Okay.
and I was teaching a karate club and an aikido club at the academy. So I would cross train with the judo guys. Like I was never, I never formally joined the organization, never tested for rank, but I had a lot of fun getting beaten up by them on a regular basis. And what I love about it is that you can do every technique with opposition.
Right.
And I've done other stuff. Like I've done aikido, and I've done I had the great fortune of being able to train under a Kuroda Tetsuzan and do old school jujutsu, old school kenjutsu, old school iaijutsu, right? And the thing about aikido, I have such a love-hate relationship with. I mean, I really do, because I love so much about the art, right? There's so many good things about the art, but it's become so cooperative. And the excuse is that, oh, well, we'll break you if you're not. And I'm like, yes, but then you're kind of like falling into the camp of doing techniques that, yes, if you can pull them off, they're going to just shatter the other person. But if you've never tried to pull them off against somebody who's truly resisting, you're going to miss key elements of how to pull them off.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The training is totally not representative of a real encounter.
No. And like I used my aikido a lot as a cop. It was like my go-to because it looked good on camera. It didn't hurt me. If the other person stopped resisting, it didn't hurt them. Right. And it was a good approach for that. But I also, by doing that, learned to do it against somebody who didn't want it done to them.
Right.
And it does make it look very different. It's not the same thing.
Right.
It's the same technique, but it's not done the same way.
Yeah. It starts looking more like what we call Koryu Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things also, and you bring up a good point in the sense that we make a mistake sometimes. This is one of the issues I think that we make a mistake with the real emphasis on police, on BJJ for police jiu-jitsu. Not all encounters, most police encounters, in fact, and specifically police encounters, aren't these sort of hands-up, one-on-one duels that we're training in most of our other arts. He's looking at my partner who's talking to him. We both know the guy's going to resist. I kind of do a little eyebrow raise, and my partner knows I'm going to move, and I grab the guy's hand. So the fight starts while I've already grabbed onto his hand. Things like that people, well, that's not how jiu-jitsu or judo ever starts. But that was going to allow and open up other technical applications that wouldn't exist in those other formats. If we started doing BJJ mats where you allowed the partner to walk up or the opponent to walk up behind you, kick your leg out, throw a choke on you, that would be a little bit more realistic, but we don't do that, right?
And I think too, and this is not a knock on BJJ at all. I love training it, and I think it's a very good art, right? But you have to kind of understand the context of what something is used in. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the rule set, if it's competitive, and competition is good, I think everybody should put themselves through some sort of competition, because then you get that stress you're not going to get in a friendly match in the dojo. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the rules of a competition reward certain things. So certain things then become prioritized based on the rules. You see that in shooting matches where, like, say the way I shoot a USPSA stage is very different than the way I shoot an IDPA stage, even though on its surface, the sports are incredibly similar. But because different things are rewarded, it changes the way you do it, right? And it's kind of the same with, like, jiu-jitsu rewards positions and submissions. Judo rewards throws more than anything else. Right. So it gives you a different emphasis, and you train for that emphasis, and you can wind up neglecting things that really matter.
Or even instilling bad habits. A big bad habit that judo has is, I was watching earlier today a Seoi Nage video, and it's a elite judo competitor showing a Seoi Nage. Every single Seoi, he's doing drop Seoi, so he's going to his knees. Every single one, he then rolls over the opponent and ends up basically with the opponent on his back. He won because the opponent's shoulders touched, right?
The rule set rewarded that.
allows that. And then with BJJ, and this is something, unfortunately, that I see with a lot of cops that do BJJ, and there's such a bias to go into your butt or go into your back that a lot of them, the minute you start putting more pressure, they immediately go to their butt or their back because they're used to playing guard. And that's a really bad habit. It actually becomes hard for people to break. I was at one of Jerry Wetzel's knife classes, training with a guy, super good guy. He's really into jiu-jitsu, police officer. We're doing knife defense. He gets on top of me during one of the training evolutions that we're doing, and then just completely lets go of a knife and holds me in a side control. And I'm like, you might want to keep hold of the knife as I start poking him in the face with it. It was like almost like he woke up like, oh crap.
It's like having a blind spot, right?
Yeah.
And remember the old term training scar that used to get thrown around all the time in law enforcement training?
Exactly.
Like that is truly a training scar.
Yeah, right? Totally.
And it's a difficult thing because yes, you need to be able to fight from your back because you might wind up there, right? You need to be able to do that.
100%.
But like I always liked the emphasis in both Kuroda Sensei's jiu-jitsu and in Aikido of putting the other person on the ground, but then you're still erect.
Exactly.
and I really like that for law enforcement and military because things may happen that are bad, and I need to be aware that a bad thing's about to happen.
Right.
There may be somebody else, there may be other weapons involved, I may be getting flanked, right? I need to know all these things. And like I said, I'm not saying that the Newaza and BJJ is bad. It's phenomenal. It's just the context is different when it's in the real world.
Right. Exactly. And I think the best thing about BJJ is the training methodology, because it's also made judo less injurious. Older people can do BJJ for much longer than you could in judo. Most of the old teachers that I know that are still in judo are mostly teachers. Some of them don't train at all anymore. Although even more, you're seeing more super competitive jiu-jitsu guys are also kind of like they don't really train anymore because their bodies are just too beat up. So it gives you an opportunity to train with full resistance, but you can ramp the resistance up or ramp the resistance down based on where you're at. All of which is really good training. I think one of the things about old school jiu-jitsu, we'll just call it that gets missed is that you can practice some of the very things that you have just talked about in kata form. Now, a lot of people their heads reel because of what are you talking about? Kata? That doesn't make any sense, And it's, they don't understand kata from the Koryu perspective. And they also don't, and kata and Koryu is also, I think, not trained, not optimized to the level that it could be.
When I was training with Kuroda Sensei, when you did kata, I'll take sword kata, kinjutsu as an example, right? He would always be the uke. And this was not cooperative training. Not in any way, shape, or form. Like you were expected to do what the kata told you to do. But if you were doing anything incorrectly, he made you pay, like immediately.
Okay.
Right? You feel like you stuck your head in a Cuisinart.
Could you shift then? Could you shift to change into something that was more effective?
Yes. Yeah. But he would still have you go back and try to do it the way the kata showed.
Okay.
But yes, in the moment, you kind of had to shift because if you didn't, he was going to beat your ass. Like he really was. You know what I mean? It was like, how can I describe it? If you were slightly out of position, you got hit with the bokken. And for those who don't know, a bokken's a wooden sword, right?
Yeah.
So it's not bamboo. It doesn't feel good. You're getting hit with a wooden stick.
Right. It'll break your hand or break your wrist if they're hitting hard.
Well, for that matter, a lot of Masashi's duels to the death where he killed people were done with a bokken.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like it's not really it's a less lethal weapon. It is not non-lethal.
Right. If somebody was coming at you or me in a police call with a bokken and swinging hard to hit me, they're getting shot.
Oh yeah, especially if they know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
If I see legit stances in Kamae, like they're getting shot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, exactly. So that's, I think, what a lot of people miss. And I'll be honest with you, I think they miss it even in things like judo, because judo has a kata curriculum, but it's almost like the lessons from randori aren't transmitted into the kata. Cody, old school, they do. They actually they should try to bring variability, resistance, opposing will. The sensei will switch things up or make things hard on you if you're not doing things correctly.
And that was one of my biggest issues with Shotokan, the kind of karate I did, because I did it for quite a while, right? And I came back to it several times as an adult and taught it. I've been in and out of that art most of my life. Is that, and it's like judo is like this way too. And I don't have anywhere near as much experience with Kodokan judo, but they view the kata and the kumite or the randori as like two separate things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you have to know the kata to advance in rank.
Right.
But they don't treat the kata like it's fighting.
Right. No, not at all.
And like the kata in karate, like there's all kinds of things in there that are grappling, that are joint locks, that are all these techniques that never get trained in Kihon and basics. They never get used in kumite, in sparring.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't understand what they are in the kata. So they're not really getting trained. It's become a dance step.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that, in a lot of ways, I think some people would, and certainly when you watch Koryu demonstrations, Embu, that you can see, it appears that that's what's happening even within the Koryu, which is kind of sad, because that's completely different than Ellis trained us. It's completely different, it sounds like, than Kuroda Sensei was doing in his schools. And that is, almost from day one, once you have the basics of the kata, almost from day one, things start getting made so that they are more difficult for you to achieve the objective that you're trying to achieve. The person starts resisting, and sometimes they're resisting in a way that's natural, and it's intended to pull the technique out of you, and that's why, you mentioned that Kuroda Sensei was always the uke. The senior is supposed to be the uke, because they know what to do to try to pull the kata out of you. And then you have other times where it's like, no, it's basically going to go to almost completely freestyle. However, certainly within Arakido, there's the different sets of kata all kind of linked together, and you find they link together when the opponent starts resisting. Because, he does this, that didn't work. He does something else that would be a natural response. And then, wait, that's this other kata that it goes right into. I actually, I didn't tell them that's what I was doing, but I developed a lot of the drills and stuff that we were doing when I was teaching a lot of police recruits off of Arakido kata, Torite kata, because they're all arrest kata to start with. And it was better material than some of the jiu-jitsu stuff, police jiu-jitsu stuff that I saw. And there's other police jiu-jitsu stuff that's exactly the same. And there's others that it's like, hey, this is actually a really good way to approach this and do this, especially when you can't do things like strangle and stuff like that, because we had to basically completely eliminate those.
Something that occurred to me while we were talking about this, who does a really good job of treating kata that way? And they don't call them kata. But I've been training a lot in a Bikini Tirsha Kali. It's a Filipino martial art.
Okay. Yep.
And all those fancy flow drills people see on the internet and make fun of, that's what they are. And once you get the flow down, you get the sequence down, then it becomes very freeform, where you bounce off it and introduce other things and change the lines and change the technique.
Okay. See, yeah, I would say at first I'm like, hey, if you're doing drills like that, that's not representative. If you can start breaking those, changing those, that is literally a kata. Now, here's something that I think, and this is going to be hard for people to wrap their heads around, but people may not realize that, say, for example, ECQC, Craig Douglas. I have trained with Craig for many years.
Craig has a strong training background too.
He very much does.
He really does.
He really does. And Craig will always surprise me, because he'll point something out or say something, and I'm like, wow, okay, this guy really has a depth of knowledge here that wouldn't be readily apparent, right? But Craig's standing grappling progression and I've been able to see it over many years, and now I've been able to see Brian Frias teach it. That's kata. Now, people would be like, what are you talking about? It's drills. But you'll notice they teach the technique, and then everything that you do is opposed. You're limited by in the opposition what you're doing. You're in an ecological approach, it'd be called constrained. So you're constrained to some extent at first, but you learn the kata. This is the way it goes, and then you immediately pressure test it, and people will come up with their own ways of getting to some of those positions and things like that. That's kata. That's how kata should be trained. And that I think is a good example of a modern system that is really borrowing from a traditional, or I say channeling, because I don't know that Craig necessarily borrowed it specifically, but channeling a traditional approach, but a traditional approach that the traditional arts don't necessarily follow today. If that making sense.
Yeah, and I had some thoughts on that I'd love to circle back to, but I wanted to point out that we were talking about the old Ibudo days, the old forum days before we started recording. I distinctly remember seeing a photo that Greg put up as South Narc of him in a gi and hakama throwing somebody. So he's done something traditional for sure.
Yeah, or I know he did. I believe it was some version of Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, as I recall. But I don't know. I've talked to him about it before, but now I've forgotten.
Yeah, no, I really like Greg's stuff. He's a very sharp guy.
Yeah, very much, very much.
So I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think this is something that happens in like two different directions, but it happens naturally, right? Because everything has entropy. Like nothing is permanent. There's no steady state. You're either improving or you're degrading, right?
Right.
So I think martial arts, and the same art might go through the same cycle multiple times. It might improve and then degrade and then improve again, or split off and the splinter groups improve. This could happen over and over again. But I think two things cause degradation most commonly for martial arts or combative systems. And one is the rule set for opposition starting to go into doctrine, like we talked about with BJJ and judo. And the other one is going the opposite direction. Well, we have to keep this stuff realistic, but we have to train it safely. And then you wind up getting more and more cooperative until it becomes so cooperative that you're not actually testing the techniques.
Right. Yeah. I think that's true. And it's interesting when you follow the history of the Koryu in particular, because you have hundreds of years of jiu-jitsu that we can look at. You can actually see that ebb and flow, that rise and fall. And you can see, even in the 1700s, you had guys that were trying to find the old style because they need to revive it, because what we're doing now is nothing but choreographed kata and things like that. It's a cyclical discussion that's been going on for centuries.
I think it's human nature. Masashi complained about it in the Book of Five Rings.
Exactly.
Like at great length.
Exactly.
Very angrily.
Yep. Exactly. The commercialism, all that. And it's, one of the things that's funny is people today talk about, well, there's samurai martial art, it's battlefield, this and that. It's like, well, that was developed because you have as your founding date, 1700 or 1690 or whatever. And that was 50 years after Musashi wrote what was going on in the martial arts in his day. And when you get that historical perspective, you can see those patterns and those cycles, and people are kind of always come back to whichever thing they want to come back to, whether it's full on resistive fighting, whether it's complete, like theoretical, smooth, flowing art, what have you.
Yeah. And I think like in everything else, right, the truth lies between the extremes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's hard because we all have unconscious biases, and it's human nature to go to the thing that is easier for you.
Right.
And you have to like really guard against that, not to fall into that trap, right? It's so easy to do.
Right. I 100%, I'm starting to get more into weapon stuff because I've always kind of dismissed it. Because I'm, most of this stuff is grappling, policing, you're grabbing onto people for the hands-on stuff. right? But now I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this weapon stuff. So I'm like, oh, that's just kind of, whether you're using shinai or sticks, you're just sort of doing stick fighting, stuff like that. There's not a lot of direct practical application for that. But I'm also going into an area that, one, I'm not comfortable with, not super familiar with, but also I do think probably offers some other lessons. One of the things you mentioned about the boken, so somebody coming with that wooden sword swinging at your head full power, you are required to maintain your composure, to stay focused, to keep. That is great psychological training, right? That's great training for keeping your head when someone's coming at you. When somebody's maybe even pointing a gun at you, you've been there before because you've had somebody swinging this big weapon at your head. That actually is a training aspect that I think is completely lost in a lot of the fully sportive competition style training.
There's another attribute that gets developed with weapons work that I think is really crucial, right? And it's the same attribute that gets developed with USPSA style shooting, because the pace of USPSA is faster for most instances, most contexts, than you would shoot in a gunfight. Not all, there are outliers, but most of the time it's a much faster pace. The end of that stick, whether it's Eskrima or a Kali or a Boken, is moving far, far faster than a hand or foot moves. So what you're getting is your brain trained to bring in visual input more rapidly. So then when you see a fist or a foot coming at you, it seems like it's in slow motion. And it's the same with shooting, right? If you get used to shooting at a USPSA pace, and then you dial that back down for the real world and the accuracy constraints and the context and everything else, it feels very relaxed.
Okay, very cool.
Like you're moving in slow motion, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that gets overlooked because it's an attribute. It's not necessarily a technical skill.
Right.
It's something you're training your body and your brain to do.
Which, if you think about it, and not 100%, but what we are going to call upon in that life and death situation is based on attributes very, very often. Now, if you have some skill with which you can guide those attributes, you are way ahead of the curve. But to think that attributes don't apply, especially those more not necessarily physically demonstrable attributes, but the ones, like you said, vision, all the different things that kind of force science delves into, vision, decision making, stress management, all that other stuff. Those attributes are crucial in a real world situation.
I would almost say they're more important than technique.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that technique isn't important. It's very important, but you can't apply the technique if you're not making the right decisions and aware of your environment.
Right. Technique maybe is something that gives us a way to guide that, and also maybe to put the brakes on, obviously in law enforcement, there's certain, hey, you maybe go full power 100% in this aspect of the confrontation, but then you need to immediately shift gears because now you don't have the lawful authority to continue to do what you were just doing. And that's, if your technique supports your attributes, it gives you ability to do that.
Yeah, I call that the transmission. Like everybody has to build a transmission in their head and be able to shift gears seamlessly without being attached to being in a particular gear.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that applies whether it's shooting pace or the amount of force you're using with empty hands or any of that. It's any confrontation you're in, especially as a civilian or in law enforcement, not on the battlefield, right? Although it applies there as well because of the laws of war, just not as strictly.
Right.
Any confrontation you're in, it's not going to be the same amount through the whole thing.
Right.
That volume is going to go up and down.
Yep.
We'll go back to Musashi, quoting Musashi, right? You can't be too fast or too slow.
Right.
You've got to match the timing and the rhythm appropriately.
Right. Yeah, exactly. One of the things I was doing with our recruits, and we would have them they would start doing resistive work probably within 5 minutes of them starting training. Because I used kind of a modified version of Craig's standing grappling as their basis. But when you're dealing with, now I've got, hey, this is a former D1 football player who spent 4 years in Marines, and now he's coming in as police recruit. And now I've got a 140-pound soccer mom who's getting onto her second career after she just raised 2 kids. And now they're paired together. You know, I'm like, hey, you need to learn how to modulate force. So a big, strong guy, you could pick her up and throw her through the window. Guess what? You can't do that in the street either. And so you're learning how to modulate force, which is crucial and critically important for police and in civilian self-defense as well. And then for her, it's okay. She's learning that, wow, I'm working against this guy and he's actually not going full out, and I'm struggling here. That gives some lessons for her as well. It's like, hey, maybe I need to make sure I have a lot of friends when I show up if I'm going to have to arrest somebody who is going off the deep end, or who's, you know, known to fight police.
You know, and I think that's something that in the martial arts world gets misunderstood. There's this myth that people just cling on to, like so many other treasured beliefs that aren't true, right?
Yeah.
That size doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we talked about the older guy who's still got the knowledge, probably more knowledge than he ever had, but he's old.
Right.
And that's just the reality of our biology, right? Well, it's the same thing. It's just physics. There's no way that the 110-pound, I don't care what kind of an athlete she is, how good she is, all other things being equal, she's not going to take a 240-pound person, assuming levels of skill are the same, assuming that the context of the situation doesn't allow her to kind of use tactics to cheat. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if just everything else was equal, I mean, there's a reason there are weight classes in combat sports.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're there for a reason.
Right. And that's a win and loss, not a life or death, right? You know, one of the things I would teach people how to disengage, and how to disengage safely, to either go to tools or just get the hell out of that situation. And I think there's a lot in police training that is, oh no, you bought onto this. You need to stay there till that guy's in custody. No, you don't. Not if you're about to get killed. That's what we have a lot of friends for. And in now, a lot of tactical decision making starts coming into that. But if I have a female officer who's got a guy holding onto her gun and trying to yank that gun out of the holster, the first thing I would tell her is keep the gun in the holster, right?
Yeah.
Worry about stripping his hand away and doing all these other fancy techniques later, because at minimum, at least keep him from getting the gun out of the holster and then showing her different ways to position her head or do different things so he can't knock her out from punching her. Because the whole thing is just hold on until cover gets there.
Yeah, sometimes, especially in LE, you just got to survive till the backup gets there.
Exactly. And people don't want to hear that because they want this nice package technique that will tell them this will always work. But you can see it in their eyes, you know, especially with the younger females or older females that come into law enforcement. And obviously with the big push to get more women in law enforcement, you're dealing with more people who are either non-athletic or just tiny, you know, with IBOs, itty bitty officers, right? You can see it in their eyes. You know, you can work these different techniques and they know it's not going to work. And to me, me as an instructor, it would be negligent for me to go, hey, don't worry, it's going to work for you. This is always going to work. And so we would be going around and giving them other options and other alternatives for their particular body, in the particular situation they were in that might work, because, you know, trying to say that this one move is going to work for everybody, and the person she's working against, I couldn't take down if he was, you know, really trying to fight and go full force on me. That's one of the fallacies of that old school law enforcement training, legacy law enforcement training needs to get away from.
One of my favorite quotes about this is from actually the novel to Silence of the Lambs, the book Hannibal. The opening line, and I'm paraphrasing, I may not get it exact, says, "Technique is the religion of the dangerous trades." And I think what happens is we have to hold on to this magic technique is going to make me safe.
Yeah.
And the less training we have, the more we hold on to the magic technique. Right.
Yeah.
The more experience we have, the more training we have, the more real world stuff we've done, the more we understand there is no magic technique.
Right.
You know? But I think a lot of people that haven't gone far enough down the road of proper training they have to believe in that to put on the badge and the gun and go to work.
Yeah, which unfortunately is most of them. I think the issue is, and this is something, I definitely wouldn't have understood. I mean, I started law enforcement late. I was 30 when I started. But you have a lot of these young people starting, and it's like, hey, this is very different, because at some point you're going to be 45 years old and you're going to have, I've already had a knee surgery and it's looking like I'm going to need to have shoulder surgery. And they're always, 18 to 30. The most people that you're dealing with that are going to be the real problems, they're 18 to 30 years old. That never changes.
Well, they age out. They either age out from injuries, jail, or just realizing it's just not worth it.
Exactly. Right. Where we don't, because this is our career. This is our job. And I share a trait with you in that I got involved in law enforcement in order to see if this martial arts stuff was real. And I learned, and I've gone through this big process of none of it, all this traditional stuff, it's not real. This isn't what happens in real life. You got to do combat sports. And then I go, wait a minute, there's a lot of this traditional stuff that actually is pretty effective, especially if you understand the context or you already understand how resistance works.
Well, the thing about combat sports, and once again, like everything else we're talking about here, I'm not knocking combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
right.
They're a phenomenal laboratory. Like they really show you things that work and don't work in the correct context, right? But the context is different. That's a duel. You've agreed to meet someone at a certain place at a certain time and fight under certain rules.
Right.
That's different than a struggle on the street. It doesn't mean the techniques don't cross over. It means that the context is different.
Right. And context,
it's not devaluing the combat sports at all. It's saying I've got to apply these techniques in a slightly different way to meet the context I'm in.
Exactly. I was going to say, and the context is going to dictate techniques, and that context is not only tactical, or it's not only it's just the nature of the current confrontation. With the guy that I'm fighting with right now is high on meth, and he's outweighs me by about 100 pounds. Right. So now, yes, you're going to have to adjust technique. Then you have a tactical consideration. Well, we're at the foot of the stairs in his apartment complex, and his family is all starting to come down the stairs now, right, to get involved in this. Right. And then you have the legal aspect. Well, I can't just pull my gun out and shoot him in the head because we're not there yet. Right. All that comes into play. Now, I think the main thing for me with the combat sports is the attribute development, because you start to learn what full-on resistance feels like.
Yeah.
You start to learn when somebody who's actively trying to dominate you, who's actively doing everything they can to counter the technique that you're trying to make work on them, which creates the ability to me to shift. Now, okay, this technique's not working. I can shift into another technique. I may have to shift into something where I can just tie his hands up so I get to my taser, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think, and this kind of goes back to some of the things we were saying about how people can apply certain arts incorrectly in that kind of context, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, if I go into that situation and do the exact same things I would do in a jiu-jitsu tournament or a karate tournament when I was a kid, it's not going to be the right thing for that context. It's a different doctrine. It's a different set of priorities, different rules of engagement. And I have to adjust based on those factors. It doesn't mean I didn't learn anything from those arts. It means that I have to apply them in the correct way.
Right. Well, not that it could just be, it's just a mismatch to the situation. I think we see that in MMA even, right? When you open up the rule set, now people can hit you when they're in your guard. You have to play guard differently, right?
Yes.
One of the things that I really harp on with BJJ translated into policing is the idea that I'm on top of somebody trying to tie their arms up, and then I grab an arm and then I fall back into Jujigatami. So I fall down on my back off the top of my suspect so I can get an arm lock, and then I get back up and then put him in a cuff position. And it's like, you could have just started to get him in the cuff position from the position you were in. Why did you have to go back into that arm lock, right? Or trying to lock somebody's arm while I'm on my back, they've stood up, they're standing over me, and I'm trying to lock their arm when, hey, in reality, he's going to be stabbing me, he's going to be punching me, he's going to be doing all these different things.
And that's what I was going to bring up too, is everything changes when weapons get introduced
Exactly.
for grappling.
Viking.
And a lot of the Japanese grappling stuff comes from a weapons-based environment. And you can see it in some of the techniques, things like Ikkyo from Aikido.
Right.
Like that could be a blade on the elbow, not somebody's hand.
Right. Not even including that you've got a weapon in your hand.
Right. And like, what happens if you have someone in a closed guard, but they've got a knife and you don't have their arms under control?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's no longer a dominant position by any means, right?
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that those things aren't valuable techniques. Of course they are, but it's context again.
Right. And I think, definitely people that are heads up are going to shift. They're going to go, okay, hey, look, I've learned certain attributes from doing this technique this way. I'm in a situation now where that it's not going to work that way. And so I have to adjust and adapt. One of the problems, and that's perfectly fine, but one of the problems with that is the people who are, especially if you're an instructor, the people who you're teaching don't have that well to draw from. And so we need to be very, very careful when we're teaching a bunch of newer people, even I think around like kind of the police instructor, newly minted, just got his blue belt. Those guys who love to play jujitsu, they don't have the well to draw from experience yet. They don't have the well to draw from even from jujitsu practice to go, hey, I'm not going to do this technique. I don't want to get deep half guard, because especially when I'm in all my gear, I'm on concrete or I'm on a blacktop in a parking lot somewhere of a strip mall or a apartment complex. I don't have the movement ability. I don't have all these other things that I'm going to be able to take advantage of when I'm in the jiu-jitsu context, whether it's in the gym or in a competition mat. And we need to adjust for that stuff and need to realize that some people don't have that same ability to think through and do those things.
And, that brings up an interesting point, because like, I always love watching guys that can adjust their game based on the context. You get guys that compete in Muay Thai and they compete in BJJ and they compete in MMA, and they're different in all of them. Right.
Right.
Or like GSP, like George St. Pierre, he was never a wrestler or a grappler. And he just like completely became a dominant takedown and submission guy because he had to adjust his game.
Right. He did start training with a lot of wrestlers and stuff.
Though. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
In short order. Right. But you know what I'm saying? Like and I think that there's a value in exposing yourself to as many different contexts as possible.
Yep.
Beyond just the value of that one particular context. Right. If all I train for is the law enforcement context, I could be inhibiting what I need to do if I'm defending myself in my own home and trying to stop somebody from getting to my family, because it's a different context, right?
Right.
If like me, I bounced back and forth between military deployments and the police department for a long time. If I hadn't learned to shift gears, I would have done a disservice to myself in both environments.
Right.
I could have increased my chance of dying in one and increased my chance of going to jail in the other.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think that somebody who truly has achieved mastery in their craft has that flexibility. They're not a one-trick pony. They're not one note. They can get a good mental transmission going where they can shift gears. Right. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. One of the things that I've really gotten interested in lately is trying to distill that the shifting gears part. And so in teaching instructors, especially instructors who are doing jiu-jitsu, because usually now it's mostly jiu-jitsu, or in teaching brand new people who I don't want to do jiu-jitsu, but I want to have a grappling base that applies in a more open-ended environment for self-defense, things like that, would be, this is how you can train those things within the context of jiu-jitsu. So I one of the students that I have, a new student, is has several stripes in honor white belt at 10th Planet School. And so one of the things that I talk about, I've kind of got a distilled grappling kind of basic grappling program that I was teaching to police and that I teach to students that are interested in self-defense and stuff, is how you can train BJJ or at a BJJ school, but train in things that are useful for self-defense things versus playing the BJJ game.
Yep.
And just getting them live reps doing that, and then saying, hey, what you do is try to win your first match always with this, or your first roll. Try to win it using only stuff you would use in a self-defense situation. And then after that, play jiu-jitsu however you want. But if you always are conditioning, okay, hey, in this situation, I get up and get away from the guy, practice that. And now you're at least putting that in your Rolodex.
One of the things I really like about the BJJ school I'm going to is that it's a retired Austin cop that runs the place. And he's in his 50s as well. He's got some old injuries too, like I do, right? And he's got some young bucks in the classes. But he's always thinking about the real world, not just competition.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference in how you train. You know, it's like I'll use an example. I'll go back to Shotokan again. The other day I was just kind of scrolling through YouTube, right? And I saw a current, like it had just happened, WUKO World Karate Do Championship.
Yep.
I didn't even recognize the sparring. It has become so oriented towards the rule set.
Yeah.
That it's lost the realism it used to have.
Yeah.
And that's one of the examples of the things we were talking about, right? The way arts degrade. Yep. And I'm not saying they're not some phenomenal athletes, right? I'm not saying they couldn't, wipe the floor with me any day. That's not my point.
Right.
But they're not optimal for a different context because they're really focused on that rule set.
Right.
And I get it. You're an athlete. You want to win. I understand. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But if there comes a time where you decide that you have a focus beyond just winning the athletic competition, you need to think about some other things.
Right. Yeah. I saw that in Taekwondo. It's we were training this really old style sparring, and then the master's nephews came over from Korea, and they were getting into this new sparring stuff that was eventually made its way into the Olympics. When you watch Olympic Taekwondo sparring now, it's a completely different animal than what I was training in Taekwondo back when I was training Taekwondo. And that shift happens pretty quick because people are going to adjust to the rules.
I saw a video the other day, and I can't remember the context. It was a martial arts context, but I can't remember where this was from, right? But it basically said, they were talking about judo. And I'm not saying I agree with this opinion on judo because I love judo, but what they said was that the Olympic Committee destroys every sport. And I think there is some truth to that, right? Because they have to make things look a certain way for an audience that is not familiar with that sport.
Yeah.
So it needs to be as exciting as possible. It needs to not be like the rounds are shorter because it needs to hold the attention of the audience.
Right.
And it's fine for that context, right? But that's not the context of the real world.
Right. It's judo has constantly tweaked the rules and going back and forth. They didn't allow leg grabs. Now the leg grabs.
Now they are again. Yeah.
All that other stuff. One thing that's, I think, kind of interesting because I see it even in the policing world is you need to be incredibly careful with using judo for policing because you're going to kill people.
Yeah.
It's on a hard surface. You're going to kill some people.
You're hitting people in the head with a planet.
Yeah. And so now we're teaching this to people that don't train judo. And so I know this great Osotogari, which Kimura used to knock, elite people out in Japan with that throw because their head hits the ground so hard. Now you tell me I'm going to throw a guy on a sidewalk with that who is resisting me a little bit, or maybe he throws this lazy punch at me when I'm trying to arrest him for a DUI or something like that. We got to be really careful about that stuff.
And that brings up something. I just thought about something with that. And this isn't something I've really consciously thought about before, so I'm going to try to articulate it well.
Okay.
If you train in a throwing art where you learn to control your opponent's fall if necessary, that's better. And judo can be done that way. Judo can absolutely be done that way, right?
Right.
Old man judo. I do throws like that at the dojo all the time. I'm like, I'm hanging on to the guy, or I'm hanging on to him while he throws me, because I don't want to hit the ground as hard as I would have when I was 20,
Mm-hmm.
But if you can, it's that transmission again, right? If you can consciously decide how hard I'm going to throw this guy, that gives you a better range of options with the same technique. It could all be a sotogare.
Right.
But
right.
am I going to turn him into a lawn dart? Or am I going to have him do the baby sit where he doesn't bend his knees and he sits on his butt?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. You can do either one.
Exactly. I think a lot of people don't realize that the gi, the modern gi as we know it, that Kano created, was actually intended to increase safety, so that you can throw people and hold them up when you're slamming them, because the old kimono would just come apart.
It just ripped.
The actual kimono themselves would just come apart because they were single stitch garments. And so, I grab a hold of the back of your neck, or I grab a hold of the gi at the back of your neck, and then I do a full-on osotogari. I'm holding your head up when you hit the ground. That has a lot of advantages. And then you can also switch. One of the advantages too is that, foot sweeps, you can hit them. They're very low risk. You can hit them from almost any position, and the fall is usually much more controlled. And people are usually kind of shocked. They're looking at you like, how the hell did I end up on the ground? I love those.
Well, and like Shotokan was big on those. So I've been doing those long before I ever did any grappling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love sweeps. If you can time them right, when the person's putting just the right amount of weight on that foot, there's really no escaping it, no matter how good you are.
There was an old book, like O'Hara Publications or something. I want to say, I may be incorrect, but I want to say Hayward Nishioka or somebody. It was a guy who was a judo guy and a karate guy. And he was showing foot sweeps for karate sparring that were excellent.
I had that book. I think it was Nishioka.
Okay, all right. I was like, oh, that was a cool book, because some of those foot sweeps were actually spot on.
Yep. Well, and that's something else you can scale up or down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we were working on that the other night at the dojo, where you can just brush the ground with the sole of your foot and hit the bottom of your foot on their heel or the side of their foot, or you can hit them calf to calf and just put that leg all the way up vertical above their head.
Right.
And anything in between, right? You can, it's scalable.
Right.
And I think that it's all well and good to think about lethality, but even as a soldier, you have to be able to be scalable with your techniques based on the context, based on what you're doing. You have a legal and an ethical responsibility to use the appropriate amount of force.
Right. Yep. Well, that is one of the kind of telltale indicators with self-defense. If they are bragging about lethal and this and that and the other thing, it's like, well, you never use your art. You never use this discipline that you're training in, because the only way you can talk that way is if you don't use it, because otherwise most of your students or you yourself would be in jail. Because everything has to be scalable, and people don't realize it. We were just talking about classical jujitsu, the art of the samurai, which some small part of it, I think you can actually historically document, does come from battlefields. Most of it was more in a kind of a lethal dueling type situation, both armed and unarmed, or both grappling and weapons, that the kind of the world that Musashi came up in. But they had the scale. Musashi talks about arresting people, like not killing people in certain circumstances, because the law, there's laws. There's always been laws.
Well, and people don't realize it, but there was no civilian police department in feudal Japan, just like there was no civilian police in feudal Europe.
Right.
The same people that went to war also locked people up.
Exactly.
And it had to be scalable, regardless.
Yep. You see, when you read a lot of the histories of different famous swordsmen that we know of today, they were called upon by the local lord or something like that. Hey, you got a guy here, he's barricaded, he's got a kid hostage. So, oh, cool, we have a hostage barricade, right? And so they would go to the leading martial arts guys, and they would get those guys to come in and take care of the problem. Those guys didn't always kill people. There's a famous one. It's been in Kurosawa movies. with a guy Kami Izumi, which I believe Kuroda Sensei's art comes from that line. And he puts on a priest's robe.
Yep.
And a rice ball.
And shaves his head.
Yep, he's negotiating with the guy, and at the right moment, tosses the rice ball at the guy, and then just jumps in and grabs the guy, wraps him up, takes him into custody. It's like this is part of this tradition, that we've been training. It's not all blood and guts and my art is lethal.
Well, and you need the lethality, but you also need the control, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise, it's almost like the true mastery comes from the control.
Yeah.
You haven't really mastered it if you can't scale it. You haven't really mastered it if you can't apply it in a variety of circumstances, right. I think.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, and not only that, this I think will resonate with you of not even using any technique at all, and not to get super woo-woo mystical, because I don't believe it is that. I believe that it's become mysticized because people haven't, unless you've been in law enforcement or military context, you won't have the background to know this. But I know you have walked into a room sometimes, or you've walked onto a scene sometimes, and this person who was about to fight 2 or 3 of your fellow officers, your junior officers, some of the guys on your squad or whatever, and then you just say 2 words, you start talking to the person looks at you, they see maybe a little gray hair, they see a thick neck, they see, oh, this guy means business. And they give up.
So early in my career in Chicago, I'm gonna tell a war story real quick. There was a cop that got shot, and it was 2 guys in a car, and they had a good ID on the car and a good ID on the guys. I was new. I was still on midnights and patrol. I hadn't been on the job for a year yet. And the description of the car comes out, and we see the car blow a red light. So we put it on the radio, we pulled the car over, and the guy I worked with, we went to the range together every week. He was also a martial artist. We talked through things and had strategy sessions and brainstorming sessions in the car, right? So we get out, and we both pop out of the car and give commands and flank with our guns out and do like a high-risk stop on these guys. And sure enough, it's them. We get the guns, we get the guys, we take them to the detectives, and we're talking to the dicks in the area. And the guy comes out, you're there for like at least 24 hours then.
Right. Yeah.
So there's going to be interviews and state's attorneys, and it's going to be a big deal, right? So we're on overtime, we're eating pizza, and we're sitting there and just waiting. And the lead detective comes out, and he goes, "I got to talk to you guys. They were going to kill you. Like, they had their guns in their hands, they were going to kill you. And when you pulled them over and dominated the scene like that, they decided it wasn't worth it."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many times have you seen that? I mean, they probably don't even show it anymore. But, remember the 10 deadly errors, and the FBI interviewed all those? They don't show that stuff anymore, right? To these young cops. They don't have any of this experience where they get to at least see those videos, where it's like the one guy who had killed a cop and taken his gun, I think, and then he's on the run, and he describes a scene where he gets stopped. A cop sees him, racks his shotgun, and says, "Get on the ground, probably get on the ground, motherfucker," or whatever it is he said. And they asked him, they said, "What was the difference? Why didn't you fight that guy?" He goes, "Well, 1, he had a drop on me. 2, that second cop was all business." He goes, "I knew I didn't have a chance with him."
And it doesn't mean what people think it means. It doesn't mean you have to be rude. It doesn't mean you have to be a bully. It doesn't mean you have to be any of those things. You just have to be in control.
Right. And how many times have you had to check a young hard charger, either on a high risk stop or on a SWAT mission or something, and they just start screaming, "Get on the ground," and they're doing all that. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, don't talk to people like that. Like, you can be very, very directive. You can be very assertive without screaming, without yelling, and even being, "Hey, dude, if you just do what we tell you to do, everything's going to be fine. Don't make a move for your waistband. Don't do this, and you'll be fine. Do you understand me?" And how much people don't understand that, to me, that is Kiai Jutsu.
Yes.
Right. And I learned a lot of that in talking to Ellis. Ellis was a crisis negotiator, right, and a crisis counselor. So he'd get involved with some dangerous people. but he's not there to use force on them. So he's got to control them through assertiveness, through being able to back off a little bit, not putting psychological pressure on somebody, then putting psychological pressure on somebody, doing all those things. And good cops do that. I don't think they have a language to speak about it in the way that I think a training in some of the traditional arts, in some of those aspects of traditional martial arts. And I'm not saying that you can get it from traditional martial arts. You can get it if you know what the traditional martial arts are teaching you. Those things come within that. And then, as you get the experience of being able to apply that in the real world, in real life circumstances.
Well, and this is going to sound a little bit esoteric too, but it's as simple as driving. You can actually, like in pursuit driving, or when I did some non-tactical vehicle, like basically the military version of an undercover car, driving in Basra, Iraq. You can learn to influence the line of the other vehicle simply by how you drive. And it's the same thing. You're influencing psychologically the person driving the other vehicle, right?
Right.
Or same thing in a gunfight, right? People think a gunfight is somehow different than any other kind of fight. And it's not. It's just a different tool.
Yeah.
Right? The principles of conflict are universal.
Right.
And people really underestimate how much psychology comes into play there as well.
Right.
Which is basically the same thing you're talking about.
Right.
It's like we talk about the flow state or the zone, and that's just Mushin. We talk about, putting psychological pressure on someone. That's just Kiai Jitsu. It's all the same stuff. Exactly. It's just different terms for it.
Yep. Exactly. It's, the only people doing it now, I think force science is starting to get into that realm of trying to study some of that more esoteric stuff. And it's like, hey, look, they had this, and they had a lexicon with which to describe it. It changed over time because I think people eventually lost the direct experience of doing it.
I don't think you can understand it without the real world application.
Agreed.
It's just not something. It's not easily trainable in a controlled environment.
Right, and you do run the risk of what the hell is this? This is woo woo, this and that, and the other thing. But then you'll see it, and you'll see lapses in it, or you'll see it in the real world. And then I'm sure you've seen this as well. At first it's okay controlling yourself, because you have to control yourself before you can control others. And then it's okay, so now I've got 15, 20 officers on this call. It's a hot call. Everybody's amped up. Real rounds just got cranked off. So everybody starts panicking. You have one controlled voice on the radio, or you have one controlled person who seems to be switched on and in charge in that situation. You will affect every other officer on that scene.
There's a reason why military radio traffic always sounds like they're just ordering dinner in a Chinese restaurant.
Right.
Because calm is contagious.
Yes.
And it's your psychology and your biology are interlinked, right? Yep. I can calm down my body by keeping my mind calm.
Yep.
I can keep my mind calm by treating my body as if it was calm.
Yes.
And it's such a powerful thing once you understand it, right?
Right. Exactly. And then when you can get to actually practice it, and then get better at practicing it, and realizing, look, screaming at people or starting to lose my shit when I'm in a high stress situation is not conducive to being able to do that. That's probably, to me, the greatest lesson, the greatest gift law enforcement gave to me.
Well, the sheer volume, and I was in Chicago. It's a pretty high volume city for law enforcement, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
But people ask about the difference between what I did in special forces and what I did in the police department. And it's like the events in the Army were individually far more intense.
Mm-hmm.
But the sheer volume of things on the police department, like just the sheer volume of experience, you won't get in the same amount of time spent in a war zone.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just, you get so much, right?
Yeah.
And that can be, we don't have time for this next rabbit hole, but I'm just going to briefly mention it. So I have this theory that, and this applies like military and law enforcement teams, right? Like SWAT teams or special forces ODAs. Too much training and not enough real world makes your edge dull.
Okay.
but so does too much real world and not enough training.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because too much real world makes you complacent because everything usually works.
Yep.
Through no great gift of you being like the mastermind tactician or the ultimate shooter. It's just the other guy wasn't very good. Everything works most of the time. Right. So then you start cutting corners and getting complacent.
Yep.
But then if you train too much and never do the real thing, now you haven't got that psychological pressure on you all the time, sharpening you. So I think you got to have the right balance.
Oh, for sure. And that, certainly the too much real world and not enough training just defines law enforcement, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We had interesting. I had the honor to work with a number of combat veterans, most of them on the SWAT team, but a lot of guys that had left the military, come into the civilian world, and were becoming police officers. And I remember some of them, after different incidents that happened on the street, it was almost like a wake-up call for them, because it was almost like I think they were thinking, well, this is nothing like what I've experienced in Afghanistan or Iraq. And yet now I had a guy just try to kill me, or a guy could have killed me because of this particular circumstance, and it was a real wake-up call where it's like, holy shit, I could have, served 2 tours and been fine.
And a crackhead with a box cutter takes you out.
Exactly. And especially because the nature of it is quite different. And I think that made them better officers, in the long run.
I think that one of the keys there, right, is understanding violence. I think people that have seen enough violence to understand this treat the world very differently forever, the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
When I was young, I had this mythical sense of invincibility if you trained hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you trained hard enough, you could be Musashi or Oyama and just like nobody could touch you, right?
Right.
That's not the way it works. That is so not the way it works.
Right.
I've never been more wrong in my life.
Yep.
And no matter how good you are, every violent encounter is a roll of the dice.
I was sitting with a group of martial artists once, and we were talking about, I won't give any names, but a guy just sort of just blurted out, we were talking about a particular teacher, and that guy's killed people. And I was just really kind of floored by that. I'd been a cop for a while already, and I know 14-year-old kids that have killed people, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to do that, and they'll take out the best warrior out there if they catch him when he's off guard, or if he wasn't expecting it, or that understanding the nature of violence, right?
Well, two things I want to say on that, and then we've gone well over our hour already, so we're probably going to have to cut this short, or not short, but have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
One is that it's never been the bullet with my name on it that scared me. It was the one that read "To whom it may concern."
Yes. Yeah.
The bad guy doesn't have to be good; they can just be lucky. Right?
Yep.
And the other thing there is that people are both remarkably difficult and incredibly easy to kill.
Yes.
At the same, and I know that seems like 2 opposing statements, but they're both true.
Right.
Like people,
you
something happens.
It's both of those are true.
Some people get killed, and you're like, really? That killed them? That was nothing.
Yeah.
And then other people, you're like, why is that guy still fighting?
Exactly. Yep. Very much so.
All right. On that note, where can people find your work, your writing, your training, all that stuff?
Well, right now, really just on my Facebook, Chris LeBlanc on Facebook. I haven't really hung a shingle out yet. I'm probably going to be doing some stuff starting in the new year. But I'm not, I only really teach privately right now. And that's probably going to hold for the near future. And then I'm looking at, and I'm doing some preliminary work to start a Substack, and I'll probably announce that on Facebook when I do that.
Please make sure I know about it when you do, because I really enjoy your writing.
Man. Yeah, absolutely. I very much appreciate this. I've really enjoyed your book. I enjoy your work. I enjoy your interviews, because I believe you're one of the few people who's bringing in that sort of classical martial art approach that does have a place in this thing that we do.
Well, it's funny, like when I was a kid, I was weird. Like everybody, when you're a teenager, most people's heroes are like football stars or movie stars. my hero was Masashi. Like I
Yeah,
devoured
yeah.
Yoshikawa's novels. I watched the movies with Mifune, and I was like, that's what I want to be. I mean,
Yeah.
as much as I could, you know
Right.
what I mean, in the modern world.
Right.
Obviously, you can't go around and fight 60 duels to the death and not go to jail today. But
Right. Yeah, exactly.
although I think our society might be a lot more polite if you really could.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? FAFO, right?
All right, my friend. Well, I've had a great time talking to you. I would like to do another one if you don't mind.
Anytime.
I think we
man.
have a lot we could talk about.
That'd be fantastic. Maybe once I get something going, so then I can actually guide people to a hey, here's a website you can check out.
Well, anything you get going, yeah, please let me know, and we'll bring you back on and we'll talk about it. So,
Absolutely. Hey, when you get out here, I'm actually interested in maybe the next step might be getting into some competitive shooting. I've trained with Gabe White. I
love Gabe.
Yeah, Gabe has done a lot for me. So
my old partner in Chicago PD went to a Gabe White class with me, and Vince looks like Ving Rhames on more steroids. And he calls Gabe the king of FAFO.
Yeah.
Because you would just never know how lethal that guy is. You would just never have any idea, right?
Exactly.
And there's a lesson there.
Yeah.
There's a couple lessons there. There's a lesson for the good guys and the bad guys there, right?
Yep. Just because he's got a SpongeBob backpack on doesn't mean he couldn't kill you right now.
All right. Well, hope everybody enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Please do me a favor. If you liked it, leave a comment, tell me about it. If you hated it, leave me a comment and tell me about that too, because they both actually helped me. So you'll be doing me a favor either way. And please click like and subscribe, because the algorithm forgets me, because, shooting, they don't like that much. And I will talk to everybody again next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.